Well, I think at the moment we're at what we call stage zero, and the Russians are really framing this in their own way for just war. And you can see that in three ways. The first one is they're trying to suggest that they've got legitimate authority. It's not an invasion. We've been invited in. The second one is just cause. We're going in there to prevent genocide. And the third one is right intention. You know, we are there merely as peacekeepers. Now, that, of course, is absolutely wrong because it's a violation of international law, Ukrainian sovereignty, and rescinding really the Minsk agreements, which froze the conflict in 2015. Now, if this was the end of it, they would remove the 180, 190,000 people that they've got arrayed along the border in Belarus and Ukraine, and they're not. So the first thing is they are still there as a tool of coercive diplomacy. It's talk or concede, or these troops may do something, they may invade. The next step they could go to is what you would call seize and withhold, seize the stuff on the left bank of the Niger River in eastern Ukraine, and then say, we've taken that, we'll take Kiev and the rest of the country unless you concede now, because all wars are ultimately fought for political means. And the last one, of course, is the sort of shock and withhold, or when they'll go and try and take over the whole country. And I think your previous correspondent is right. If they do that, the first thing you do in modern warfare is control of the air and control of the maritime environment. So they will seek to have air superiority and would therefore need to negate the strength, whatever it may be, of the Ukrainian Air Force. And that will be preceded probably by cyber attacks to bring that shock and surprise, which will enable the armed troops, the armoured formations, to try and get to Kiev as quickly as possible. Now, one thing at the moment, Ukraine's favour, is the mud of spring. You wouldn't want to be the Met man suggesting what the right date would be for Putin.
And, I mean, Putin hasn't been shy about parading his nuclear arsenal, amongst other things, leading some people to suggest that this could become as critical as the Cuban Missile Crisis. We've just heard today that the UK is sending more defence weaponry to Ukraine. Do you think this has the potential to escalate into something that isn't just between Russia and Ukraine, but far wider and, frankly, far scarier?
I don't think it does. This isn't framed in that way by Putin. And really, if you look what he said 2 days ago, this is really to do with his thought that there really isn't an independent Ukraine. And you see that in his strategic objectives. You know, he said for 20 odd years he wants to regain lost territory and spheres of influence. If he was going to try and drag in the West, he might try and do things like use cyber capability against the Western powers to sort of disable power stations and things like that. But why would he want to escalate against the West and NATO when the the European NATO outspends Russia, and the addition of America means that he really would get absolutely strategically stuffed should that happen? So he wants to try and make sure that he deters NATO and we deter him, and that's why we've had this enhanced forward presence for the last 6 years, since we went from a reassurance policy to a deterrence policy following the Warsaw Summit of 2016, because he unmasked what he was going to do in 2008 in Georgia, and 2014 was his initial annexation of Crimea, and then the actions in the Donbass. So we know what he's up to now. So I don't think he'll escalate. I think the talk of nuclear weapons also is sort of pretty farcical and is a sort of, again, a tool of coercive diplomacy. Mutually assured destruction and extended deterrence and minimum deterrence mean that that probably is not going to come to anything, but it plays into this fear factor that people have, same as terrorism, same with war. You know, people fear nuclear weapons, but of course the opprobrium that you would have by using it for the first time since 1945 would make you a pariah forevermore.